Castlemania! The episode that feels like it should have aired last month and has a disappointing lack of Castlevania references. What else does it bring to the table? Let's take a look. Right off the bat, I was impressed that the show wastes no time remembering the events of the premiere, with Twilight desperately, and fruitlessly, searching for more information concerning the Chest of Harmony. We already have a much more competent handling of an overarching plot device than last season, where Star Swirl's journal went completely unmentioned until the final episode. Although, as much as I laud the show for not forgetting about this plot device, it may have done more harm than good in the context of this particular episode, but I'll get to that in a minute. Something I really enjoyed about this episode, and all of Season 4 thus far, is that the story involves all the members of the main six. Just like in Princess Twilight Sparkle, each member of the main cast in Castlemania gets a moment in the spotlight, unlike a lot of Season 3, where we focus solely on one or two characters while the rest were inexplicably absent. I certainly wouldn't complain if this is a trend that continues throughout the rest of Season 4, as the characters are Friendship is Magic's strongest asset, and situations where they're played off each other has delivered some of the show's most memorable moments. Castlemania continues to set the bar high in terms of visual design. Getting an extended look at the depths of the Everfree Castle brought forth some great set pieces. The animations and transitions from all the trapdoors being activated were a marvel to look at, and just like in the premiere, there are some great instances of shading and lighting used to enhance the mood of the shot. One of my personal favorite shots in this episode, though, was actually rather simple. When Applejack and Rainbow Dash are descending the staircase to the basement of the castle, Applejack is taking the stairs, so she goes in and out of shot as she rounds the spiral staircase, but Dash is floating down, so her placement in the shot remains static as the camera continues to pan downwards with her. But even though AJ leaves the shot, their conversation keeps going, because from Dash's perspective, she can still see AJ even though we can't. The show is continually getting good with creative cinematography like this, which is essential to keep the visuals fresh when you're working with puppets like they are in Friendship is Magic, and therefore only have three primary angles of character perspective. Similarly enjoyable was the dialogue. I didn't notice it during my first viewing, since I'm so used to tuning the credits out, but Castlemania is the first episode written by Josh Haber, who I believe is one of the new writers brought on for Season 4. And if all the new writers are as good as Josh is, then we're in for a very enjoyable season. If nothing else, the guy can write some mean dialogue. The banter and jokes throughout this episode really carried it, and the quips kept coming one after another and rarely felt stilted. My only minor complaint was an overly zany Pinkie Pie, which isn't so much a complaint, but a personal preference. As long as she has some moments of relative calm through the season, I'm okay with it. Rarity and Fluttershy had hilarious opening dialogue, as Fluttershy struggles to sympathize with Rarity's underwhelming reason for going into the castle. Applejack and Rainbow had some great moments as well, as they both egged each other on in an attempt to prove that they were braver than the other, and holy crap, Angel's little giggle for some reason had me laughing and dying at the same time. The best line in this episode, though, was between Spike and Twilight, when Spike is worried about the sounds coming from the castle, only to have Twi mindlessly dismiss his concerns and continue reading. When the noise finally becomes too much for her to ignore, Spike throws a quick quip her way, only to have Twi chastise him for his sarcasm.
No one likes sarcasm, Spike.
It's smooth, natural dialogue exchanges like this that make these characters so endearing, and they're easily the best parts about this episode. However, something that I did feel was stilted was the moral. I didn't really feel like an episode filled with hijinks from start to finish really warranted any sort of moral epilogue, as the cast didn't actually learn anything concrete. The moral of friends being there to help you when you're afraid felt like a huge stretch, considering that there was never any emotional weight to what was going on, giving way instead to shenanigans and one-liners, not to mention that each character was with a friend, and they only fed their fears instead of reining them in. I know they're all referring to Twilight in this moral, but still, the only reason Twilight was able to calm all of them down was because she had an overarching view of the situation. Literally. Speaking of Twilight, her addendum to the moral felt even more forced, as the journal was downplayed so heavily that basing a moral lesson on its impact seemed completely contrived. The book did absolutely nothing in terms of servicing the narrative, and there was nary a hint that it provided Twilight any useful information other than an excuse not to be scared, the only passage revealed to us containing completely mundane musings on the part of Celestia. It seemed like this bit of exposition was included only to set up the girls starting a journal of their own, which I'm going to assume will replace the letters to Celestia now that Twilight isn't her student anymore. A fine enough idea, but its introduction could have been handled with a bit more finesse. The biggest disappointment, though, came from the story itself. I couldn't help but feel that the entirety of the main cast showing up at the Everfree Castle at the exact same time, after establishing in episodes past that even going into the Everfree Forest in general is something no pony is comfortable doing, felt a little forced. The fact that they didn't run into each other until the climax of the episode was also stretching it a bit, but the fact that they continually just missed bumping into each other led to some fantastic transitions from group to group using simple pans through the environment, so I'll give the episode a pass on that. In addition, the actual plotline of this episode kind of meandered a bit, and doesn't really serve any purpose towards the overarching narrative that the premiere set up. The beginning of this episode references the chest from the premiere, so you would think that Twilight is going into the Everfree Castle to find out some more information concerning the Tree of Harmony in the chest, considering that's what Celestia sent her there to do. But this setup never pays off. Celestia's diary Oh god, I can see the memes coming already. Didn't shed any light on this subject, which is a real shame because the structure of this episode was a great opportunity to continue building on the lore concerning the Tree of Harmony, but that doesn't happen. Instead, nothing happens. Normally this isn't a problem for the show, since its narrative is usually segmented, but now that they're attempting a connected storyline, episodes like this that are just slice-of-life scenarios and gags start to become a bit more intrusive, especially when you reference the overhanging narrative but fail to capitalize on it. The premiere ends with dangling this mystery in front of its audience, and this episode starts off by dangling again, and seems to imply some more information coming concerning it. But then, the plot devolves into a self-encapsulated story about the girls scaring each other. Which granted was entertaining, but because we were teased with promises of world building and some additional exposition, the execution of this episode, that by itself would have been completely fine, almost becomes unwelcome as the audience waits for the bits of plot progression that never end up showing themselves. Unless we count the shadow creature at the end. This could be a really interesting development as long as it wasn't just an ending gag. We saw some weird shadows stalking every pony throughout the episode, but here at the end we see that it wasn't Pinkie Pie as one may have thought, but an actual apparition. Does this mean we're going to have a recurring villain this season that isn't locked to their own two-parter? If so, this could provide even more momentum for the season-long narrative, and give this story even more potential if handled well. The nature of the creature is also an interesting thing to consider. Applejack mentioned that not all of Luna's power was vanquished when she was banished to the moon. Does that mean that this creature is the remnants of the Nightmare forces from the second arc of the comics? A conflicting interpretation of Nightmare Moon's powers that will relegate the comics to an alternate universe? Or is it something else entirely, completely unrelated to Granny Smith's story? It'll be interesting to see how this pans out going forward. If it pans out at all. It's just a bit unfortunate that the entirety of this episode's event served no real purpose other than to establish two afterthought points right at the very end. Overall, though, Castlemania is an enjoyable 22-minute romp, filled with great dialogue and gorgeous visuals, and serves as a good first outing for Haber, who proves he understands how to write these characters. While the lack of continuation of the main plotline was a bit disheartening, we're only 3 episodes into this season, so far be it from me to start spouting doom and gloom this early. Now I have a question for you. What do you think of the apparition at the end of this episode? Think this is our first look at a new baddie? Or is it just a little gag to close out the story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have questions for me, I'll be doing a follow-up Q&A on this episode in the next few days, so feel free to send me a question at any of the social media links in the description below. Until next time, I'm Tommy Oliver. Stay curious.